कहीं मैं चेक करता हूँ.
Hello and welcome to StudyIQ English, your one stop destination for a smart UPSC Civil Services exam preparation. A very good morning, everyone, as I welcome you to today's Hindu news analysis, where I have selected exam relevant important articles from the Hindu newspaper, the New Delhi edition for today. Before we begin, let's understand that since most of these articles, especially the ones that are highlighted on the editorial page, they are complex. They need slightly more detailed analysis. The biggest challenge of analyzing the Hindu newspaper is to see how can we use all the points, the various data, the various concepts given in these articles into our UPSC mains answer writing. Because not most questions are direct. As we have seen in the previous year questions, the questions are complicated, they are multi layered. And therefore, as we begin with this very exciting Hindu series, a target of our classes will also be to teach you how to formulate effective and scoring answers in the UPSC mains. Of course, we shall talk about the GS mains paper, but apart from that, these articles provide wonderful insights even for the essay writing and ethics paper. So, with that in mind, let's begin with today's agenda. Here I have selected 5 important articles, while 3 of them are more detailed, and hence we shall see them from the perspective of UPSC mains exam. All right, and then we have 2 shorter articles that are just quick 2-minute readings, and these are important, of course, for the UPSC prelims exam. Okay, so now let's begin with the very first article for the day. And as we proceed with the lecture, should you have any comments, should you have any doubts, any clarifications, then please feel free to comment and I shall get back to you accordingly. Now, the very first article for the day has been picked up from the Hindu New Delhi, page 6. It discusses the India China dynamics. It discusses the India China relationship, which is far from smooth. We all know that in the last few years, India China have been engaged not only in territorial disputes but also a major segment of the bilateral friction, the bilateral conflict happens to be the trade issue. And this is exactly what this article talks about. The article begins by saying that suddenly China has done something very unexpected. China has ordered a complete withdrawal of many workers in the IT manufacturing sector from India. Now, these employees had been working in Indian manufacturing sector. And suddenly China decides that more than 300 Chinese workers, engineers, will be called back to China. And the most interesting thing is that there was no official communication with the government. All this is happening at a very, very unofficial level. So, this has left behind many questions. Is it a simple, straight case of immigration or out migration? Or does it talk about a more serious concern? And this article here by Dr. Shashi Tharoor clearly says that no, there is a deeper problem. It is not just about calling back your workforce. It is not about the brain gain that you call your engineers and manufacturing professionals, IT professionals back to your country. It's not just that. It looks like a diplomatic game this time. So, what is this hidden game of China? Let's quickly understand. And now, as we read every topic in the newspaper, topic mapping is very important. Let's also understand why is this topic of India China trade relations important for the UPSC. The first reason, of course, is your GS paper too. We know that international relations has a segment on India China relations, and this is a clear cut case of economic diplomacy. It is a foreign policy issue, and hence GS paper 2 corresponds with this article. Now, similarly, since we are talking about bilateral trade, talking about supply chain, as we proceed with the article, we will see we are going to talk about rare earth materials. We are going to talk about China's export surplus. We are going to talk about reducing India's import dependence. And all these are economic concepts, and therefore, GS Paper 3 economy, GS Paper 3 technology. All these also relate very deeply with your UPSC mains GS Paper 3. Okay, and now let's try to understand then what was this hidden agenda of China that it ordered suddenly this kind of a recalling of its workforce back to the nation. So clearly, the article says that China does not want India to benefit from improved manufacturing process. China does not want India to break its monopoly in the South Asia and in fact across the world when it comes to China's hegemony. China's monopoly, domination over the manufacturing sector. So, therefore, China would never want that India should get any kind of technological supplies. So, definitely, this is a strategic move to completely disrupt the Indian manufacturing sector. Okay, that's important to understand. Another thing that we should observe here is that India has recently been talking about skilling India, the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. All these are in line with making India self sufficient as a manufacturing hub. We all know the diversion of the iPhone industry. We all know the diversion of so many supply chains from China to India. Now, this has indeed upset China's plans, and therefore, China wants to stop the high end production lines in India. Okay, this is very important agenda of China right now. Production lines in India. Now, another thing to understand is that China has therefore also undertook a very ruthless policy of controlling, stopping its exports of rare earth metals. Now, we all know that as India is so committed to the target of reducing its nationally determined contributions, our carbon footprint, our pollution levels by 33% by 2030. And therefore, our government today is indeed expanding the solar energy segment, the clean energy segment. But all these require one input, and that input is the rare earth metal. Not only are rare earth metals such as gallium or germanium or graphite very important for solar cell manufacturing, but they are equally important for semiconductors, electronic cars, which of course India is looking forward to in order to move towards renewable energy. And here China hits us. So, therefore, the reason why China has controlled, please remember, China is not only the leading producer but also the leading exporter of rare earth materials. Okay, so therefore, China has controlled all the exports of the rare earth materials. We call them as REMs. I gave you certain examples such as there is germanium, there are many more. Then we talk about gallium, we talk about so many other smaller components of use like nickel, graphite, all these come in the picture. The purpose again is to hit India's solar manufacturing semiconductor industry. Now, there is one third intention that China has behind withdrawing its workforce. Now, China knows that it dominates the supply chains. The COVID-19 pandemic also showed us how India really experienced a deficiency of pharmaceutical supplies, of not only the REMs but also many other manufacturing small equipments because China chose to stop its exports. So, what happens now when China gives any kind of supply shock? For example, China reduces its export volume, or China decides to, suppose, increase the number of tariff duties or custom duties or any kind of import export duties on its materials. It's country like India's which definitely will pay a price because China dominates all these supply chains. So that is also one tool of China to economically exploit its, you can say, rival countries. Of course, India happens to be in that spot. So let's also understand that China today is operating with a very unique strategy. One, of course, we know is strategic economic diplomacy. Do not let countries like India become self sufficient in manufacturing. Stop the supply of raw materials to them. That's one thing. stop the flow of workforce to countries like India because these are expanding countries. So you call back your workforce. Now, there is a third tool that China is using as per this article, which is the strategy of overproduction and export surplus. What are these? Today, China happens to be one such country which is also experiencing some own domestic problems which have impacted its income, national income, economic growth, GDP. What are these problems? Now we all know for a very long time China dependent on the one child policy, which led to a very dramatic demographic change in China. Until recently, now China has understood that because of the one child policy, the total fertility rate in China had become extremely low. When the fertility rates decline in a country, a natural outcome happens to be a lower demographic dividend. And what is demographic dividend? We all know that demographic dividend is the young component of any country's population, typically between the ages of 15 to 50. These are the young people, so they actively participate in the workforce. They are responsible for most of consumption, most of demand. They are the drivers of the GDP and national income. But in a situation where a country has implemented only one child norm, imagine the result over some years or decades. Eventually, China also started becoming an aging country. An aging country is one where the demographic dividend becomes low because of lower fertility, and the old age component of the population increases. Something similar to what's happening today in South Korea and Japan. Then what happens when your own workforce is insufficient? Naturally, your output, your economic output also declines. At the same time, when you have a more aged population, above 60, above 65, that's called the geriatric population, the old age population. It increases the dependency ratio for the economy because these people are not actively earning. They are dependent on social welfare, government welfare policies, on pensions. This further leads to economic drain on a country, and this exactly is what China is going through right now. The total cost of insurance, pension spending on Chinese government has increased, and therefore this is a threat to China. China sees it as a major loss when it comes to economic competition with India. So what's the solution? China has discovered a very unique solution, and this solution comes from overproduction and export surplus. When you know that because of a less robust workforce and a lesser demographic dividend, you will not have a great economic output. You start depending on export earnings. So, the more you manufacture and the more you export your goods, the more income you earn. And that's the tool that China is using today. Okay. So, China has now started with the clear cut agenda of overproducing, flooding the markets of other countries with its own domestic manufactured goods. In return, what does China get? When China has supplied all the other countries and flooded their markets with its own goods and services, what happens? China gains monopoly because these goods are cheap. They are made in bulk. So people will buy them. And this is the economic benefit that China is deriving right now. Okay, so the clear cut tools China uses is overproduction, complete control of supply chain, and one more thing. What's that? Export surplus, gaining income by excessive exports. And therefore, China cannot stand or tolerate any competition coming from countries like India. Now, I hope that everyone can hear me clearly. Yes, then please let me know. Okay, great. Now, having said that, okay, so I hope you can hear me properly, all of you now. Do let me know if there's any issue with the volume or the audio. Right. So back to the agenda. And therefore, as we understand that China today is therefore maintaining a very ambitious program called as the Unipolar Asia Vision, which means in the South Asia, China wants to be the leading manufacturer, leading supplier, and the leading monopoly holder of all the supply chains. And hence, it weaponizes its overproduction capacity. So, in this case, overproduction is being used as a tool, as a weapon for economic domination over other countries, and the result is in front of everyone. We know today China leads the world not only in REM, rare earth metal, in pharmaceutical supplies, but also across sectors like AI, artificial intelligence. Then across quantum computing, which has major application in science and technology, the 6G development, as well as the electronic vehicle segment. So clearly, China controls all these important critical economic supply chains, and that's the whole big reason that China wants to do everything possible to stop India from becoming a manufacturing leader. Therefore, this decision highlighted by the article of calling people back to its own country comes in the same light. To stop India from becoming a manufacturing leader, to stop the supply of workforce, inputs, raw materials, supply chains, all that it can do. So now, therefore, when we know the strategy of China, overproduction, filling the market, dumping the market of other economies, and gaining that profit with its cheap manufactured products. What is the solution that India has as per the article? The solutions that India has are limited, but definitely they will be very, very productive if implemented in the right way. So, what are the solutions? The biggest solution would be production linked incentive scheme. Under this, the government is trying its best to improve India's domestic manufacturing and supply sector. Apart from that, the government is doing its best to attract more and more of foreign investment into the supply sector. For example, we have certain important schemes like the Make in India scheme, the Atmanirbhar Bharat India, Skilling India scheme, Startup India scheme. The purpose of all this is to encourage domestic manufacturers, domestic business houses to produce more and more without being dependent on other countries. Now, recently, the government of India has also tried to give a boost to the rare earth material segment by encouraging more excavation, more processing of these materials in order to stop dependence on countries like China, which constantly give us supply shocks. Okay. So, for example, today, because of all these policies like Digital India, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and other schemes which I spoke about, India, yes, is attracting global leaders such as the Apple. Apart from that, the Foxconn, from where the company from where China has called back its labor force right now. Okay, so let's understand that in future we have to handle certain more bureaucratic delays, red tapeism. We have to make our manufacturing sector more easy to operate by allowing local businesses easy permissions. We have to create a culture of ease of doing business. Because when there is easy license, easy approval, easy permits that can be taken by domestic manufacturers, naturally our import dependence goes down and we become self sufficient. Okay, so ease of doing business again has to be made easy in India. India has to make sure that we become self sufficient in semiconductor sector, the chip making for the AI segment, as well as sensors, engines, mobile applications, and ultimately the mission is the same as what the Prime Minister Modi ji recently said. Made in India is the only way to go. Atmanirbhar Bharat is the only solution to achieve geopolitical, geostrategic independence in an era where we are seeing so many types of economic and political conflicts from happening. There are so many challenges. That's a very good question you have asked here, Viru. That what could be the challenges in implementing the production linked incentive schemes? Well, most of the problem comes from bureaucratic delays, from government approval mechanisms. So, what we really have to do is either to create a public private partnership model, or we have to understand that we must make it easier for our own entrepreneurs to obtain government licenses at the earliest. We have to invest more in domestic excavation, in satellite geo mapping, that where are the precious materials such as the REMs located, and then invest better into their excavation processing. Of course, it's a time taking process, but this is the only solution if we want to defend ourselves from the strategic interventions that China does. So, this is exactly what this article talks about. And on this note, I won't skip the article without giving you an interesting question here. So, for this article, can you try to find answer? And I will discuss this tomorrow with you. Could you find the answer to a simple question if I ask you that what are certain basic concerns for Indian economy that emerge as a result of our excessive dependence on import of the rare earth material and AI chips and the semiconductors on countries like China and the US? What steps can be taken by the Indian government to make India self-reliant in real time or very, very soon? If you could find answers to these questions, then these exactly are also the type of questions that are expected in the UPSC mains exam. So, for every article, we should think of questions, and then we can also discuss later how to address and approach the solution to this question. Okay, so with this, let's now go quickly to understand that today, when I am saying that Indian government should do so many initiatives to find solution to the problem of depending on imports, what are the basic weaknesses that India experiences in the economic domain? The biggest thing is India's manufacturing ecosystem is still not very developed. We lack manpower. We lack adequate government approvals. We lack privatization. We can still claim that we need more and more foreign investment in this sector. Second thing is that India depends on a very, very patchwork technology. Here, the article calls it screwdriver technology. By this technology, I mean to say that India today depends on a strategy where India is importing small components from different countries, and then they are all assembled in India. So, this kind of assembly line work will never make us manufacturing self sufficient, because, anyways, if we are only assembling the parts and then creating the final product, we cannot claim that these are completely Indian made products. Our dependence for raw material is still very high. So that's one problem with Indian manufacturing sector right now. Another thing is that today, as we are seeing that the US is imposing massive tariffs on India, and US has also been very biased here, because same kind of tariff structure has now not being witnessed in China. China is being given so many exemptions. So in such a situation, when there is a lack of global support, when there is too much diplomacy and politics over trade, then the only solution is to boost economic self sufficiency in the long run, plus also improve our global ties with like-minded countries. Okay, so these are certain solutions offered by the article itself. Of course, we can go for more research and training. We can train more workforce into the manufacturing sector jobs by using the potential of India's industrial training centers, using the potential of India's higher learning institutions, colleges, and universities. We can do foreign collaborations in technical education. That's one solution. Then, apart from that, we can also collaborate with certain countries like Australia, China, Africa when it comes to the process of mining of critical minerals and REMs. That's very, very important. We can also have better ties with friendly countries. The article calls this friend shoring. Just like we had the word offshoring, the article calls this friend shoring. Let's outsource certain processes which we are weak at, not to economic giants like US and China, but to certain like-minded countries like the other countries of ASEAN and Japan and South Koreas. And ultimately, it's the education sector. The more technology driven, the more modernized, the more occupation oriented education we impart, the better results we harvest in the longer run. In fact, here we have the new education policy 2020, which actually talks about something similar: expanding vocational skills, expanding technical skills in higher education. Okay, so with this, we end this article and let's proceed with the next article taken from page 7. Again, this happens to be from the editorial segment, and all the editorial articles are crucial for the mains exam. They are detailed, they are complex. This article takes a deep dive into the gender bias issue, but not just that. Also, the problem of lack of transparency, the problem of lack of efficiency in India's electoral processes. So, the article talks about two issues at once. One, discrepancy in election process of India. Two, gender disparity in political processes in the country. So therefore, let's do a quick topic mapping here. To which UPSC GS papers of the mains does this article relate with? Of course, we talk about GS paper 2, governance and polity, because in your UPSC syllabus, under governance and policy, you have subjects like electoral reforms. You have subjects like role of the Election Commission of India. Then, of course, article also talks about GS paper 1, social issues, because the key element of this article is gender disparity, lack of equality between men and women when it comes to democratic processes in India. Second, literacy, social inclusion, problems of the vulnerable segment. All these are a part of GS paper 1, social issues and social justice. So, what is this article? This article says that recently, when there was a revision done in Bihar's electoral documents, one very upsetting, one very sad reality was discovered, that majority number of those whose names were deleted from the electoral rolls happened to be women. Could this be a pure coincidence? Could this just be about a faulty enumeration? Or does it have something actually to do with gender disparity as such? Because how come, if the names were omitted, these names were mostly the names of women electorate, women voters, and not men voters? Particularly, these women representing the vulnerable segments of Indian society, coming from Dalit backgrounds, coming from tribal backgrounds, coming from poor income backgrounds. So, can we call this a coincidence or just a fault in enumeration? Is it simply a mechanical fault? Or is it actually an ethical concern that even today there is so much gender disparity? Now, we are talking about the Bill 128 of the Indian Constitution. We are talking about providing 33% reservation to women in the parliament and state legislatures. We are talking about the National Education Policy 2020, where gender equality happens to be a priority. And despite that, this is another reality that today, when you talk about majority of names of poor people not being counted, not being listed in the final electoral roll, these are the names of our women. So definitely the article says it is not a mechanical error. It is absolutely very well commented actually, Rishi Pandey. It is absolutely about poor literacy, poor awareness, and definitely gender disparity. Very well said. So now let's quickly see what issues is the article highlighting. Very important for your questions that come directly in GS paper 1 and 2. So please understand that in Indian society, social issues and social justice, you will get a majority of direct questions. The questions are very simple. They will be based on social problems, particularly gender problems. For example, they may give you a question saying that what contributes to a poor participation of women in Indian politics even today? The question can be as simple as why in the recent few years majority of women have refrained, they have been absent from casting their votes or participating in a democratic process that's so important to India being one of the largest democracies. What could be the reasons? Another question could be that what are the reasons for the poor education and employment rates among Indian women? So, all these questions you can find answers to from articles like these. Okay, do use the data, do understand the basic concept that the article says that this new finding, a very strange finding, that when we talk about the Bihar's electoral roll, the electoral list, when the list was being revised, the officials realized that so many names were not there. They were not there. And this is happening right before the election is about to be conducted. Very unfair, very strange. But what is more strange is the fact that why were these missing names mostly women? Then the government thought, okay, let's find out the reasons behind this problem of missing names of only the women voters. So one reason was people said it could be migration, okay, because women generally migrate after marriage. In fact, in India, one of the biggest reasons for women migration, interstate migration in India, is marriage. Most women migrate after marriage to the husband's house, and then sometimes they are not able to register themselves in the new place of residence. So people thought, okay, it must be that problem. But then there was an investigation done, and as per the data revealed by NSSO, it was found that from 2020, let's say to 2021, the shocking thing is that only 7.2% of women in Bihar had migrated. Whereas when I talk about men, it was as high as 31.4% as per this article. So men migrated up to 31% and women only 7.2% were migrating outside the state. So how come that the names of men were intact in the list and women were missing? So migration definitely cannot be the cause of this problem here. Second very interesting thing is that people said it could be about death rates. Maybe more women are dying because of maternal mortality that's high in Bihar, early marriage, early pregnancy, lack of reproductive health care. Maybe these reasons are responsible. Okay, fine. But when the investigation was done, it was found out that the death rate were also same among men and women except 2020. That was the peak COVID period. So that time definitely women were having higher mortality, obviously owing to the fact that they lack institutional health care. Apart from that, it was same. So when the death rate is also same, then how do you justify that the names of only women voters are missing? This has left behind a major confusion. So then what are the true causes which we cannot deny behind this problem? Well, clear cut the problem is that we are talking about the problem of gender inclusivity. We are talking about fairness in election process. Now, when you remove only one segment of your population from participating in the democratic process, does it not mean devaluation? Does it not mean a sort of complete violation and complete deprivation of Article 326, which says India provides universal adult suffrage? Every individual above 18, irrespective of their gender, religion, caste, creed, race, ethnicity, have a reality which manifests. And very well said, Abhishek, that of course even this data looks like it is subverted, because when the government says 7.2% women migrated, we can obviously assume it must have been very, very high. So data always does not show the reality. That's very true, very well said. In fact, in reality there might be many more women who are missing from the roll, which we do not even know. For example, one district has been highlighted in the article, Gopalganj. It was noted that here, in the last few years, there is a 17%, almost 18% decline in women electors, women who vote, as compared to men. Male voters only 11% decline in the same period. So you see, there is a clear cut disparity. So, what are the problems? The real problems, once they were investigated, were found out to be one, lack of literacy among women. Definitely, that's the leading cause. Okay, so when we find out the leading cause behind this kind of a political, you know, violation of women rights, naturally one thing is low literacy rate. Now let's understand, Bihar is one of the states which has lowest women literacy as compared to men. Even the sex ratio, the adult sex ratio, the number of women per thousand men, has not improved as compared to the national average in the last 10 years. So, therefore, what happens now? Women do not understand the process of enlisting themselves because most of these registrations are now being done online or hybrid, online plus offline. So these women, since they are not literate, they did not understand that they need to once again register themselves for new elections. Absolutely, very well said, Rishi. That it is Article 326 which says that election to the House of the People, that's your lower house, Lok Sabha, has to be done on the basis of universal adult suffrage. Everybody has a right to vote, and yet we see this problem. So many women being denied their rights in 2025. Okay, so that's a massive problem there. Now, with that, let's understand if literacy is one problem, another problem is digital gap. Okay, that's very important to understand. Today, we are saying that majority of our population has access to data connection, mobile phones, internet technology, but actually, it's not true. In the rural segment, there are so many people who still lack basic digital knowledge and awareness, and these women from Bihar are typically coming from that background where they did not understand the digital nature of self declaration forms. They do not know how to register, they do not understand how to upload, download, or fill up these digiforms. Is it their mistake? Definitely not. But they have paid the price. Similarly, let's understand that even on the part of the government enumerators, there has been a gap. There has not been enough door to door data collection. There has been a lacking of door to door awareness campaigns, which should encourage women and young individuals from re-registering to re-register themselves. That's very important. Now, last but not the least, apart from digital illiteracy, apart from basic lack of education, apart from lack of door-to-door campaigning, there is another major problem. And this problem is even on the part of the State Election Commission, there has been a gap. We can't deny that gender sensitive planning is missing. We often talk about making reservations for women. We often talk about making the local self government more gender inclusive. We talk about gender budgeting also. But least do we understand that gender sensitivity means giving some priority to vulnerable women, at least to the vulnerable women, when it comes to any political process happening within the country. This includes electoral role making. So there was definitely a lack of gender sensitivity here. There was a lack of training to the staff members of the government so that they could make sure that no woman is left behind. They could make sure that they enter those villages which are places which have a disproportionately high number of people coming from scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, OBC background. We should target those women. We should enable them to register themselves and create awareness among them. So denying them awareness is quite like denying them the right to decide who rules them. Very undemocratic. Okay, so that's something we have to understand. And all these comments are lovely. Absolutely, that's what the article is trying to say. So these are the broad reasons. So is there any solution? So now that we have spoken about problems, I hope you understand that even in your UPSC GS paper, all the exams, when you talk about a social problem, it's equally important to conclude with some solution because way forward or solutions are equally important. It shows that you are a solution oriented individual. And exactly this is what the article says also. The article says that now what is the solution? One thing is that we should make gender auditing. What is auditing? Some kind of proper investigation, some kind of a proper accounting. We should make it mandatory when there is a proper gender accounting done of the electoral list of the electoral roll. Now, electoral roll simply means the electoral list, which has the names of all those people who go and give the vote, the name of the voter basically. Okay, so this has to be done in a very gender sensitive mode. We need gender auditing. We have to revise it multiple times before the elections happen. And if there is a gender disparity found in a particular district, then it should be re enumerated. The census officials should go back and find out the reason why such less women are on the list. That's very important. Second solution could be in areas which have lesser amount of literacy, which have people coming from such backgrounds who do not have the adequate education and digital awareness. It is the onus of the government officials to go to the last mile, door to door, and please educate them, make them aware, sensitize them on the importance of registering themselves, verifying their data and records. If something is missing, then it has to be recreated. They have to be provided with documentation. It could be that so many women, owing to early marriage from the poor communities, happened to migrate within the same state, such as Bihar, and they could not re register themselves. They are not even educated enough to do that. So now is the time that the census officials go and make sure that it is done timely. Last but not the least, we should definitely use the services of those on whom entire rural India depends. Did you understand what I'm talking about? Yes, I'm talking about the ASHA workers here. Accredited social healthcare activists. Who are these people? So many times in the last few months we have heard about them. These are a group of women who are known as accredited social healthcare workers. These are women who go door to door in the rural areas of India, and they work on the behalf of the government by providing the poorest of the poor people vaccination, birth control, basic medicines. Ultimately, they are the last mile connectivity to provide the poor people with primary health and hygiene and sanitation. Hence, their role is very important. Recently, the Indian government has spoken about providing ASHA workers with social insurance. Very good move. It has been decided that they will be given a salary hike and a bonus as well, given the difficult conditions in which they operate. So these workers can be employed by the Election Commission of India and by the Election Commission of the respective state, like in this case, Bihar, to go and spread the election awareness among people. Then, apart from that, we can have self help groups, we can have NGOs, we can have the Anganwadi workers. All of these people and the Panchayat workers can come together and create the necessity on the part of the rural people to go and cast their vote, to go for the registration, and to make them understand if they are uneducated, how to comprehend, how to understand digital format of enumeration. So that's all this article is trying to say. I hope you were able to understand this article properly. And let me quickly give you a question here. I would say that discuss some important ways in which the government of India can ensure adequate and equal participation of vulnerable women in the central and state electoral processes. Let me repeat the question. Discuss the important ways in which the poor, vulnerable women in India have equal and adequate participation in the central and state electoral or election processes. So, whether it's the Lok Sabha election, whether it's the state assembly election, whether it's the municipal or panchayati election, please suggest some important ways. I'd love to hear from you, and thank you for the kind comment. Definitely, I'll be here every day to take your sessions, and let's make sure that these are extremely successful sessions. We learn answer writing, we understand all the articles, and we also understand how to use this information for a perfect answer. Okay, wonderful. So now let me quickly take you to the next article for the day. And although this is nothing new, for the last 1 month, this is exactly what has been spoken about, that US has increased once again trade tariffs on India. Now, what should India do? India is in a very absurd, in a very confusing situation. We are in a dilemma now. On the one hand, there is India Russia ties, age old ties, security, defense, trade, migration. On the other hand, there is India US relationship, characterized by a very high bilateral trade, of course, massive number of Indian workers working in the US. And then you have the China element coming in between. What should India do? Soon to become the second or the third largest economy across the world, today India is facing repeated Tariffs by the US. Is it an economic necessity? That's what the article is asking. Such a high rate of tariff. Is it a need? Is it really an economic necessity? Remember just last month when the Donald Trump government had decided to impose about 25% tariff on India. People were shocked. India was shocked. And then Donald Trump said that the only reason behind such high tariff is that we want to protect our economy. We want to protect our own trade balance. We want to protect the jobs of our own people because US feels threatened. That was the reason that he gave. Okay, we understood that it was an economic necessity. But today, as the Trump government is slapping the tariffs over countries, especially those countries who are a part of the BRICS platform, especially those countries who have a good relationship with Russia, what do we understand this to be? Can we be deluded every time by saying that it's an economic necessity? Then what justifies the 50% tariff on Brazil and what justifies the few weeks of exemption that China has been given? If European Union countries and China are also importing oil from Russia, then why has India been blamed for importing oil from Russia? And that's the reason that the Donald Trump government is now giving that yes, India is a major exporter of oil and gas from Russia. Russia, one such country which has been fighting Ukraine for the last few years. Hence, it is completely the politics between Russia versus NATO. NATO, a forum that US loves to pamper and finance. Definitely it is not a trade reason. Definitely it is geopolitical enmity that's coming in between now. So let's understand what the article says. So the article opens by giving us another shock. It says that the total number of tariffs imposed by US on India has gone up to 50% now. Already there was a huge hue and cry about the 25% tariff on Indian goods that was recently imposed. Okay. Now again today the government of US under Donald Trump administration says that there is another 25% that should be in place from July 31st onwards, which will also now be implemented immediately after 21 days of the first tariff. Now the Ministry of External Affairs is shocked. India right now is in a very difficult situation. So let's understand what are the consequences of this step. Before we do that, article is very important. It has been picked up from page number 1, very crucial for your GS paper 3 Indian economy. Okay, very important for tariffs, a very key part of your UPSC syllabus in the Indian economy part of GS paper 3. Of course, we are talking about custom duties, we are talking about trade, migration, foreign policy, GS paper 2. These also come in the picture. Before we begin talking about this article, what do we understand by tariffs really? So much so is being spoken about tariffs everywhere. What do we even mean by tariffs? Would anybody want to comment? What is that? In a very simple way, if we are supposed to tomorrow write an answer, we could say that tariffs are custom duties. Okay, these are custom duties. Please feel free to comment if there's anything. Yes, absolutely. What you're saying is valid, Rishi. Even the Ministry of External Affairs said the same thing what you are saying. That it's not just shocking, it's unacceptable. It's exploitation, nothing else. But what are tariffs? So tariffs are nothing but custom duties that are imposed on merchandise goods. Okay, these are custom duties that are imposed on merchandise goods. And what is the main purpose of tariffs? If we were to say that what is the main aim of these tariffs? Why should the tariffs be put? So the main aim of tariff is that we should try to protect our locally produced goods. Goods that are produced in my country should be protected from competition by the same kind of goods produced by another country, so that the price of my goods do not suffer. The demand for my goods should not suffer only because of the competition from outside goods. A very good example of what China does. For example, if India makes a battery and it sells it for rupees 100, a big pack of batteries. But you know that China, we just saw in the first article, China's strategy is overproduction and flooding the supply chains. So the same pack of batteries, practically the same function, practically the same durability from China, could cost me only 70 rupees. Then naturally I will buy the cheaper alternative, right? And that's the purpose of tariff, that my local manufacturers are protected. Ultimately, it's to safeguard your economy. And that should be the logic also behind implementing tariff. As per the World Trade Organization, the whole logic of tariff is is the whole reason behind tariff implementation is to maintain autonomy and safety of domestic low income countries, because they cannot compete with extremely high income countries. That's the logic. Yes, it could be. It could be absolutely, Abhishek. Yes, we can speculate that. Let's see. We'll come to know how developments are happening. That's an interesting point you're making. Okay. So if that is the reason behind tariff, then what reason is the Donald Trump government giving us? How come Indian manufacturing goods suddenly have started threatening the goods in the US? Definitely, that's not the reason. The reason is something very different. The reason that the US government is giving us now is that India continues to import its oil from the Russia despite the fact that US has imposed sanctions on Russia. US is not happy with Russian stand on Ukraine. US is a key supporter of Ukraine and NATO. Why will it be happy? Obviously, it's not happy. So, therefore, it does not want India to import oil from Russia and boost Russian exports and Russian economy. That's the reason that US has given. Today, we are asking, is that fair? Is that fair? According to the WTO, the World Trade Organization, the whole purpose of tariff should be to protect your domestic economy from competition. But to use a political reason behind imposing such a high tariff is absolutely economic exploitation and nothing else. And that's also what today our foreign ministry is saying. So let's quickly jump in the article and try to see that what reasons has India given. India is saying that Russia is one of our top partners when it comes to defense equipment. Remember the big BrahMos missile? So many other machineries, missiles, and submarines, weapons of war. Not just that, Russia happens to be our topmost oil supplier, particularly after the Ukraine war. Today, when we are seeing so much turmoil, so much problem going on in the West Asian countries, owing to the recent Israel Iran conflict, owing to the consistent Israel Palestine Hamas conflict. We know that it is one reason where, until just a few months before, Iran was threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz, that thin, narrow strait in the West Asia from where major supply of oil enters the Indian subcontinent. Until recently, situation was so dangerous. Then why a country like India, with leading massive population, growing economy, should not take care of its economic security? We will have to import oil and gas from Russia. So India says, what is wrong in importing oil from Russia? Political tensions apart, it is a purely economic decision from us. Why should you punish us for that? Second thing is that importing oil is a matter of energy security for a major country like India. It has nothing to do with geopolitics. It doesn't mean India is supporting Russian war against Ukraine. India never said that openly. The third thing here is that it's not just India, by the way, which is importing gallons of oil from Russia. It is the countries of EU who also do that. But EU happens to be a key participant in NATO also. How come then US has no problem? Why this stepmotherly treatment only towards India right now? On a similar note, there are so many other products like uranium enrichment material, which countries like US itself and European Union are taking from Russia. Then why blame India only for importing gas and oil? Are we saying something wrong when we question like that? Of course not. Okay. So another thing is that India is today trying to also clarify one more thing, that there is a certain concept, okay, in economics GS paper 3. It is known as price cap correlation. You may have heard about this word earlier. I'll quickly explain. Okay, this is called price cap correlation. Now, correlation means partnership. Price, cost. Cap means an upper limit. There is a forum. In this forum, there are certain countries, including the countries of the G7 and Australia, who together have decided to put an upper limit to the price of Russian oil. For example, $60 per barrel. What's the purpose of this? The purpose is to make sure that there is fair competition maintained in the market, and also to make sure that Russian revenues only from oil stay under a certain limit. A very good morning, Jai Hind. Okay, so that's the reason behind the price cap coalition, the partnership of G7 Australia, which tries to limit fluctuations in Russian oil. They have fixed it. Like recently, it was $60 per barrel. But India is saying we are maintaining the upper price coalition limit. We are not buying it on an expensive price. If it is $60 per barrel, that is what we are also buying it at. We are not buying it for $80 or $100 per barrel. Then why are you blaming us? If we are maintaining all the rules and laws here. Second thing is, India is saying that our strategy is multilateralism. We are not trying to be any kind of a unipolar country who will either completely support Russia and Russia's actions on Ukraine, or we will completely support US and the US sanctioning of Israeli violence against Iran or Palestine. We have not taken any one side in this whole triangle. We are multilateral. And this goes back to history. Remember Jawaharlal Nehru and the non-alignment movement. Agreed, today's geopolitical realities have changed. But the basic underlying foundation behind India's foreign policy has not changed. Even today, we look forward to economic growth. We look forward to energy security. And all this with multilateral attitude. We are not aligned. And in past also, we had not aligned with any one group of the Cold War period. Same is what we believe today also. Then why should we be punished when China, a country as extremist as China, can be given few months of tariff exemption by the US? We do not understand that today, okay? So therefore, today we look forward to closing even more strong bilateral trade deal, free trade agreement with UK. We will depend on our trade in goods and services with Russia, and at the same time US is also a major trading partner. So therefore India cannot understand today this sudden economic exploitation by the Donald Trump government. It will impact Indian economy in a very negative way. So how will it impact the Indian economy? That's important to understand. How will it actually impact the Indian economy? Let's see how. One way it will impact Indian economy, of course, is by threatening all the Indian exports to the US. That's a major thing we have to look forward to. That's a danger for us. Also, this sudden 50% tariff in India is nothing but double standards on the part of the US. As I just said, US itself and European Union is massively importing things like uranium, other materials from Russia. That is okay for them. But if we take oil, they are having a problem with that. Similarly, India has often said that whether it's the United Nations or whether it's the WTO, the world is having enough of Western hypocrisy and double standards now. We are having enough of that. We do not need more of that. Now, having said that, how will it harm India if this tariff does not change? So, one of the ways in which massive harm will happen is that India is the largest export destination for all the, or for that matter, we can put it like this: US happens to be India's largest export country, export destination. Our 17% of total exports go to the US. So will it not harm us? Of course, nobody will buy our products with this tariff rate. Obviously, demand will go down, our exports will decline, our export surplus will decline. So we will have some kind of a trade deficit. That's one problem. Second thing is that this is nothing but economic coercion. What US is doing now is nothing but economic forcing countries for its own political interests. Last but not the least, in India, let's understand that Indian pharmaceutical sector, IT sector, textile sector, and for that matter, our auto components, gems and jewelry, all these sectors will also have a massive hit if this 50% tariff is not revised. So in that light, we are yet to see how future developments happen. But as of now, of course, it is coming as a big shock for the country. Now, quickly, let's look at another small article. This is brief and crisp, typically for the prelims. Article says very interestingly that the government, the parliament, amid so many controversies going in terms of the Bihar electoral poll controversy. At the same time, there is another controversy happening with regards to president rule in Manipur. Among all these debates and controversies, suddenly Parliament has passed two revolutionary legislations. Which are these legislations and what is the use of these legislations? So clearly, let's understand that now recently the Indian government has passed two very, very important clauses. One happens to be the Carriage of Goods by Sea Bill 2025, and another happens to be the Merchant Shipping Bill 2024. What is the use and efficacy of these bills? They will modernize India's shipping industry. They will modernize India's maritime sector. So let's see what are these bills. So one bill happens to be Carriage of Goods by the Sea 2025. This was passed in Rajya Sabha. Another is the Merchant Shipping Bill recently passed in Lok Sabha. Please understand, very crucial from the perspective of GS paper 3. Indian economy, okay, blue economy in particular, economy that uses the sea resources or the maritime resources for its economic growth. So from the perspective of growth of blue economy, these two are very important developments. Any questions, please ask. The aim is to modernize the old age colonial era laws, but let's quickly understand what are these two bills and how will they help us. The first one, as I said, is the Carriage of Goods by Sea Bill 2025. It is based on defining the rights, responsibilities of various ships and commercial boats that are navigating in the Indian territorial waters. Okay, to lay down the regulations regarding waste disposal, fuel usage, territorial integrity to be maintained, safety, sea piracy. All these will be important issues here. Similarly, this includes electronic transport records. All the navigations done by Indian boats, ferries, ships will now be recorded electronically so that for future we have a ready data available. The next thing is this also defines. Absolutely, absolutely. That's wonderful, Rishi. Thank you for the comment. That's very true. World problems are not European problems. Absolutely. That's very well said. Wonderful. Thank you for your comments. Now, this clause also is trying to fulfill India's major ambition of becoming a maritime hub by 2030. India wants to be a major player in the maritime, in the sea navigation segment. Why? Because India has a long coastline. Do you know the state with the largest coastline? Can anybody tell me which state in India has the largest coastline? It's an easy question. Okay. Similarly, we are trying to make sure that we operate under given, transparent, strict international maritime laws. So that's the intention behind this entire bill. Now, if anybody wants a PDF of this, if you want this information, just to help you in answer writing, you can let us know in the comment box and I will make sure that you get this PDF. Now with that, another bill that has been passed is the Merchant Shipping Bill 2024. Why? What's the aim? The aim is to replace the British government time Merchant Shipping Act 1958, which is now obsolete, very old. Oh, very good. Absolutely, it is Gujarat. Very well answered. Anandu, very well answered. Yes, that's Gujarat. Wonderful. So India indeed has a long coastline, and both these bills are therefore trying to take the benefit of India's blue economy based on trade through sea or through maritime waters. Now, this bill completely aims at stopping sea pollution, maritime pollution, particularly plastic waste pollution. It also tries to make sure the health and safety of those who are navigating the sea is intact. Okay, then apart from that, registration of every ship has to be done, and then we have to follow the rules of International Maritime Organization. Now India's total coastline happens to be 7,500 kilometers and more. Apart from that, 95% of all the trade that's happening is happening through sea. So definitely these two laws want to modernize the sea trade. They want to make sure that we attract more and more investment in this sector. We make Indian ports international standards, global standards, so that they can of course do more business. At the end of the day, it's about economic benefit of the blue economy that we need to harvest, And this article ends here. It's a small one. And now the last article of the day. But before I do that, I forgot the question. At least we should have one question in mind. If you want, I can also show you the answer format. We can talk about answer writing also based on all these articles. If you want, let me know in the comment box. Okay. So, in this article on the improvement of India's blue economy, let me put an interesting question to you. And this question says that mention certain initiatives taken by the Indian government. Mention certain initiatives taken by the Indian government to promote its blue economy and to achieve the vision of maritime India vision by 2030. So, has the government done something? Please let me know. Okay. Yes, that's the length. Wonderful. Thank you, Rishi. Okay, now the last article of the day. This is just a quick news in the passing, but it's good to know that in Poland, okay, there has been a re-election, and as per the result, there was a leader from the Conservative Party by the name of Karol Nawrocki. Okay, Karol Nawrocki. He has now been elected as the new president of Poland, and the person whom he has defeated happens to be somebody who is from a very liberal party. Okay, so he happens to win the presidential election by defeating his key okay opponent, and now he has won by a decent margin also. And what we need to remember is that the reason why this person has won the election is because he talks about more liberal regime. For example, a key agenda of his electoral regime was giving more rights to the LGBTQ plus community. Now you might know that today, as we talk about more open minded social policy, the Supreme Court of India in the last few years also has taken some such steps. For example, the decriminalization of IPC, Indian Penal Code, Section 377, which means homosexuality in India was decriminalized back in 2018 and 19. This was a major step for making Indian society a bit more open to newer forms of identities. Similarly, another very interesting question I want to ask you at this point. Under the National Health Policy 2017, which section of the IPC, which section of the Indian Penal Code was decriminalized, and the attempt to suicide was also decriminalized? It was a major initiative taken in India's healthcare sector. That's a quick question I want to ask you. Yeah, that's also true, Abhishek. That's the question I want to ask you. Which section of IPC spoke about attempt to suicide being a crime? It was removed, it was decriminalized. Which was this IPC segment? Do let me know. With that, let's remember this person. Okay, Carol. Mr. Carol has won the. That is about homosexuality, Abhishek. I am talking about which section of IPC was decriminalized for decriminalizing attempt to suicide under the National Health Policy 2017. Think again. Okay. Now, this person has won the election because he talks about giving more rights to the LGBT group. That's one thing. Second thing, he talks about, a more liberal electoral reform agenda. He talks about a more independent judiciary. He talks about a more free immigration policy. Now, immigration. Now, this word really strikes very deep, because if all of you are following news every day, you must know that nowadays one key agenda across the whole world has become this whole policy of immigration. Recently, the Donald Trump government said we do not want immigration. He sealed his borders to outsiders. People living in US for a considerable number of years were also asked to leave. They were not then given the visa extension easily. But he is not the only one. Majority of European countries today are waking up to their anti-immigration agenda. Nobody wants immigrants from outside, particularly Asia and Africa. That's a very interesting topic. I will cover it someday in the current affairs. But as of now, understand one major reason he won, this person, was that he speaks about making immigration more easy, rights to homosexual groups, a more independent judiciary, and ultimately, he finds huge support in the US government led by Donald Trump. So this is just a news in the passing, good to remember. And with this, we are done with all the news events, all the news articles from the Hindu of today. And before I end, I would love to hear your comments on the answers to the questions we spoke about. Any particular topic you want me to cover in current affairs from the perspective of UPSC or just awareness perspective, which excites you, which you want to talk about. If there's any input, if there's any suggestion from your side, then I would love to hear that. We would love to hear that at Study IQ English. So do like the channel, do follow for the latest updates. Do subscribe the channel so that we can keep you posted regularly. Thank you so much and see you later again with another exciting Hindu session. Bye bye and all the best.